Welcome to the Win All Day Everyday podcast presented by Prairie Hockey Academy. My name is Barrett Kropp. I'm co-host here with Justin Simpkins, the director of Prairie Hockey Academy. And Merry Christmas. Happy Boxing Day to you, Justin. Another episode ready to go here today.
Yeah, and what a great day for hockey. Right?
Yeah.
It's Boxing Day in Canada. This is a fun event. It's always an incredible day.
Yeah,
So
for sure. I know even like when I was just a little kid, every day Christmas was awesome. You got to open the gifts, but you couldn't wait for Boxing Day to watch all the World Junior games taking place. And, all the Team Canada's off to Sweden to participate in this year's event. And we're really looking forward to seeing those results and watching the game later on today.
Yeah, it's and I think Boxing Day. Here we are. Our listeners maybe thought there's going to be a break. We told them there wasn't going to be a break. We wanted them to be able to experience this. And a lot of us travel on Boxing Day, right? You kind of have your day at home. We're traveling to grandparents or parents' homes, and we wanted to be with you as you travel. We want to be able to give you your hockey dose today, and at the same time, some really good leadership advice. So some good stories, some leadership. Let's talk about hockey as we get into the World Juniors.
Yeah, fantastic. And on today's episode, we are really fortunate and blessed to have with us a guest that has been in the trenches at World Juniors, at the NHL, when there's Christmas and Boxing Day games at the NHL level down to World Juniors, and just a brilliant career. And he's spent 20 years with the Vancouver Canucks. He's had 11 plus times with Team Canada, whether it's the Olympics or World Juniors, and all kinds of success there. And is currently the head athletic trainer for the Vancouver Giants. And so welcome to the show today, Mr. Mike Burnstein.
Thank you, Barrett and Justin. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So how are things going there with the Giants this year? A bit of changes in terms of coaching staff, and you got a young team and whatnot. How's the season going so far at the midway point?
Yeah, I mean, so far everything's going really well. It's we're obviously a younger group. We're trending in that way here for this season and into next year. We'll keep growing. As you mentioned, coaching staff change with Michael Dick, our previous head coach, going off to the Toronto Marlies as an associate coach there. And then bringing in Manny Vivros, who's a former Western League coach here in this league. And where was he? Swift Current. And
we know him well in this part. That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
He had a great run.
Guy, a really good coach. And he's spent the last 3 years in the American League with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. So it's been really good having him here, along with Adam Maglio, the associate coach. So some familiar faces, a little bit of change as well, like in the training department. We have a new equipment manager, Cord Ivanko, who is also from Regina. Yeah. And so there's a little bit of a Saskatchewan flavor there as well. He was an assistant trainer with the Pats over the last couple of years with Hooner there. And so we were fortunate enough to bring Cord in to join us this year. And our previous equipment manager moved on with the Vancouver Canucks as well too on their equipment staff. So it's nice to have some promotion within our organization, to have some guys move on to the pro level at different areas as far as coaching and trainers and whatnot.
Yeah, that's great to see. And as the Giants have been known to move players on, also there's a plethora of coaches and, as you said, other support staff that continue to move on in the ranks. So that's a great, kudos to your ownership and to your upper levels of management to allow that, to facilitate that, because when you know that those growth opportunities exist, then you get people that want to just, sort of knock down the door at their resumes to say, yeah, I'd love to be part of that program that wants to move people on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Mike, we've got a wide range of listeners on our podcast that we've been able to provide them a ton of information with some great coaches, some strength and conditioning, some nutrition, and just, overall leadership skills. And I know, being a coach myself and being in the game for a long time, the value that an athletic trainer provides to a program. But maybe some of our listeners out there, especially if they've got kids that are just in some younger age groups of U15 to U18 and different academies and whatnot, maybe they don't understand really the role of what a head athletic trainer would be. Can you just kind of unpack that for us and what your job has been for the last 25, 30 years?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, first and foremost, it's more my education is more in the athletic therapy, sport medicine side of things, and so what that entails, looking after the players' injuries, overseeing their nutritional aspects with different people, like whether it's a nutritionist or team physician or orthopedist or strength and conditioning coach. So for my general role, I oversee that, but for my particular role more so is just, the emergency on ice care of a player, the off ice rehabilitation, whether it's acute or chronic injuries of the players' injuries throughout the season, and off the ice stuff too, whether it's like colds or mental health stuff that needs to be addressed or directed with, all those sort of areas come into my area. And with me being the conduit as far as the therapy, the medical department goes, I have relationships with our team physicians, chiropractors, dentists, massage therapists, physiotherapists, and then I take all that area and oversee that, and then just kind of manage that information along to management and coaches as far as availability and stuff like that goes. So it's a wide range. It's kind of one of those positions, depending on what level you're at, wears a various different types of hats at different times, if you will. Mm-hmm. But it's an exciting role to be part of in a team, and it can be high stress at times, but for most parts, it's pretty fulfilling.
Yeah. And the level of trust that you've got to be able to build within all that, obviously you've got all those practitioners that you listed and the trust that you've got in them, but then the players have to have that trust in you to make sure that they're getting not just the right advice, but just sort of the right timing of that advice and making sure that it's not just sort of some bro science or just sort of something that you're just picking up off of, some rogue website. Like, this is you having an invested career, starting with the Vancouver Canucks back in, the mid-90s and having a 20-year run with them. Talk about some of your time there with the Canucks initially. We've had a couple of cup runs with them, had some Hall of Fame players, the Sedins, the Burries, McGillneys, Linden, and there's probably so many more. But just talk about sort of how you were able to garner some of that trust with some of those legendary players, and maybe even just some guys that are just the Black Aces trying to get in the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, great question. And for me, when I started off with the Canucks organization, my first couple of years I was with their American League team before I got promoted to come in with the big club here in Vancouver. And so that really helped me kind of sharpen my teeth a little bit, just coming out of school, being involved in hockey for a lot of years prior to that. It just really gave me a kind of an opportunity at the professional level to be around a lot of really good people and coaches like a Jack McElhargy, who was our American League coach at the time, who was, a veteran of a player and a coach that kind of was one of those people that brought me under his wing to kind of help guide you a little bit, being a young trainer at the pro level. And so at the time, for me, I was right out of school, and some of the players were younger than me, and most of the players were older than me. And so it was more just kind of really jumping into it, where you're using your education, taking some of the experience that comes your way at that level, and then you go from there. And then, after like you mentioned, in mid '90s and '95, I came to Vancouver and had the opportunity to come in the organization here. They had just finished going to the Stanley Cup final, losing in Game 7 the Rangers the year before. So there was a lot of excitement around the organization at that time. And that was their second time going to a cup final. And so it was exciting for me as a young guy coming in, very intimidating, very nervous, all those little things that come along with it. But I had a lot of really good people in and around me to kind of help guide you along and give you that support to kind of, to the point where you start feeling uncomfortable, which you never really feel comfortable in this sort of a role. And that was never my approach, but it takes a good 2-3 years where you start looking around, where you're feeling like you belong a little bit. And that comes along with a lot of the people that you mentioned there earlier that do help you with that support system. For myself, being a young trainer at the league at the time, to give you those experiences, and that goes with coaches and equipment managers and everybody's the staff that makes the team a special place.
Yeah. And like, maybe, in your role now, obviously the head athletic trainer and therapist with the Giants, but going back to 95 and you get this call up to the big league and the big club. I think what people don't really recognize is the number of support staff that are, behind the scenes that, support the on ice production so that an athlete can go out and perform, and we get to watch that or go to on TV or go to a game. But after a game, you're on the road. I mean, you mentioned just having an equipment manager go up and join the equipment staff of the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, how many people does it take on the backside, right, with amongst the trainers and the equipment staff to even pack that road show up and get on to the next location?
Yeah, it's a big production. I mean, in the mid '90s when I first started, it's like anything. The game's grown so much now, and back in those days, you had basically full-time staff of 2 medical trainers and 2 equipment managers, and that was your staff. And then you'd have one other equipment manager that would look after the visiting team when they come in. So really, it was like almost like a 5-person crew, and that was normal at the time at the NHL level. And then on top of that, you throw in, your doctors and your game night helpers and all that sort of stuff. But the game now has progressed to, you can double that staff. The operation's now so big as far as the traveling goes, loading up gear, loading up your medical trunks, loading up your supplies, post game, going into a city, unloading it, playing the game, packing it up again, and then going off. So it's quite the production. It's a neat experience when you're part of it, because you do work as a crew together to kind of make all that stuff happen. And you're right, there is a lot of behind the scenes stuff. So once the puck drops, a lot of that stuff is made happen because of the trainers and those guys that put in the long hours and the dedication that they do, whether it's on the medical side or equipment side. They're real special people dedicated to the game. Not in it for the limelight, just doing the job and feeling part of the team, part of the organization. And so really neat people across the board and at any level across the country in our game. A lot of people who have time for trainers, and I call them hot stoves, where you can, if you're looking for a good story, pull a trainer on the side of the hallway and either have a coffee or a beer, and you'll have some pretty good stories.
Yeah, well, that's right. And that's why you're here, Mike. We're excited for these. It's perfect.
Walk us through what a typical day, whether it's now with the Giants, working with 16 to 20-year-olds, or even your time with the Team Canada, or back to your time with the Canucks. What would a typical day look like? Let's just call it a home game, right? Yeah. I mean, you just talked about sort of the circus that it requires to manage a road trip, but what does a typical home day look like for an athletic trainer?
Yeah, so you're obviously you're putting in a long day on a game day, so the hours can start pretty early in the morning and go late into the night after the game. So typically in the morning you would come in and first and foremost you just make sure your medical room's all set up and your supplies are all ready and organized, and then the biggest part is more just putting together your injury report for the day. So you have a pretty good perspective of who's available, who might not be available, and any issues that come up that morning, whether in the previous night, whether a guy was sick or comes in sick, or an injury from the practice before that you didn't foresee. You really kind of want to get your ducks in a row as far as all your information, so then you can present that to the management and coaches so that they know from their end what they're having to deal with. So that's kind of the first order of business, first thing out of the day. And then generally, once you get a good feel where the players are at in the morning, you're doing a session of treatments if need be. If you have your injured guys come in early, you're looking after those injuries. And then for the most part, the players go away in the afternoon. They kind of rest, eat, collect themselves to get ready to come back later in the afternoon. And oftentimes during that time, you're doing like injury records. You're logging all your medical information while it's quiet time, and you're putting in all that. You're looking at your supplies, you're looking at anything that might need to get done that night on any particular players. And then players arrive back later in the afternoon. And then you're, again, doing maybe another set of treatments or organizing them to get ready for the start of the game. The game goes off, and then you deal with any of the injuries that happen from an acute or emergency setting during the game, and you deal with that. And then post-game, it's more of a wrap-up, again, more just like dealing with any injuries, assessing everything that's happened with yourself and the rest of your medical staff, and then formulating a report post game so that you got as much information off to the coaches and management so they know what they're dealing with that night in case you need to make any roster changes for the next day. So that's a lot to unpack in 1 hour in one quick segment, but really you're going from 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning on the game day, and you can go till 11 or 12 o'clock that night depending on how the injuries go. So
Right.
that in a nutshell is pretty much what it's like.
Yeah, and a lot of people think that, the NHL and the limelight, the glamour of, playing and traveling all over North America, but in reality, you're just going from a rink to a hotel to an airport and then back to the rink and doing your job, right? Like, it's not like you're a tourist and just kind of kicking your feet up and trying to kill time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. You have the if you're in the city the night before, you like oftentimes you have the luxury of once you get settled in to see a little bit of the city, go for a dinner and that sort of stuff. But you're right, unless you're in a city for an off day, you're really not sightseeing or doing too much of that. You're basically at the rink and getting your job done throughout that time.
You get to memorize the bowels of the arenas, right?
Yeah, you certainly do. Yeah, oftentimes, and it's interesting. Like you go to these different arenas over the years, and a lot of them are, the NBA's playing at the same time. So you're coming in to unload your gear, and there might be a game that night, and you're standing courtside watching NBA game going off while you're waiting to unload the gear. And other times might be a rock concert in there, so you're standing beside the stage waiting for the concert to break down, and so you can get your dressing room set up for the next day. So those are the things the players don't see. But as trainers, you get to deal with those things at the different hours, and you see all those other different aspects of other people's operations that are interesting to see as well.
Yeah, for sure. The sports betting world has gone crazy the last couple of years, right? And we've seen lots of situations, even in football, where players aren't reporting injuries and how it can skew some bets and all that other stuff. I imagine that's got to add another layer for head athletic trainers too, to be like you're talking about, taking these extensive notes and making sure there's a report, being submitted all the way up the food chain, so to speak. More so now than ever before. Like, you've got to be bang on with all that information because you're like not that you're not caring for your athletes, but the sports betting industry that's out there is relying on this crazy amounts of information that you've got to be able to deliver.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like anything is, in medicine, or you're dealing with professional sports or anything at that level where that stuff's involved. The level of confidentiality is high, and so I think for any of us in that head athletic training position that holds that sort of information, you really want to keep your bubble really close. Like, you're not running around telling as many people as you're worried about information and stuff like that. You're really kind of keeping things close to your chest and just letting the right people know at the right time. And sometimes you're holding back on things that you're not divulging for specific reasons, protect the player. I don't think you're ever really thinking about it too much from a betting perspective, certainly not at this level. But as far as, confidentiality, protecting the player, protecting the organization, at the end of the day, it's a game, but it's the player's health first and foremost that you got to protect, and that's your first priority.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful part of that trust that you've talked about, right? And establishing that throughout your reporting sequence and whatnot. Yeah,
I do have a question about that. Maybe even for I actually don't know if there's the rule, if it's NHLPA based or anything. You see this game sometimes played by coaches at press conferences, especially during playoff time, about injuries, right, with players. And is it mandatory that they have to state whether it's upper body or lower body? Because I know that they don't just say he's injured. They're like, oh, it's an upper body injury. It seems to be like it has to be labeled something. They can't say, yeah, it's his right quad, or they don't want to, right?
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, is there a rule there?
It's not necessarily a rule. I think you just have to, like you were saying, you have to divulge something. And so when you can go upper body or lower body, obviously from our end, that can be pretty generic and pretty wide open. And so
Yeah.
you're protecting the player. You're protecting, your roster to move on, especially in the playoffs when you're playing every other night, and those lineup changes can make a significant difference. And so, I think it's for, obviously protecting everybody for the right reasons, but The NFL is clamped down on making it more specific of the player availability because obviously, like Barrett
Fantasy
said
football.
there
Yeah.
earlier, there's so much going on now at this level, and everything's happening so quickly, and video and replay and all these sort of things people are so involved with it that they want information, they want it instantly. And so, back in the day, we used to be able to protect the players a lot more from that sort of stuff because it wasn't so prominent back then. Whereas now it's something that you have to address or think about.
Right. And then I think even like after the playoffs, right, there's like a 48-hour window or something where you then have to then divulge all the injuries, or, so-and-so is now going for surgery on his ankle and his hip and his elbow. He's been taped together for, 45 days.
That's right.
It's like,
yeah.
Talk about the, after you got your education done, you spent some time in Hamilton, American League, and then on to the Canucks and now to the Giants. The trends in the industry, I'm sure, has changed since the last time you were in a classroom learning about all this stuff. And is there anything out there that has really sort of caught your attention and has really, maybe sort of shifted some of your mindset around the job in the last couple of years?
I mean, I think medicine's constantly evolving, obviously, and certainly at the sports medicine level, we have the luxury of being a little bit more aggressive with our care players because you're playing a game and things are practicing and things are happening really quickly.
Right.
If you're dealing with just the general public in the medicine setting, you're not really worried so much about them playing a game that night. You're just, you're looking after the person's health. They need to work or do their recreational activities. So we have the luxury of obviously being a little bit more aggressive with our care. You have a lot more other people involved in their care now, whereas, sports psychologists, strength and conditioning coaches, massage therapists, physiotherapists. So there's a big team of people that can be involved in their care. And there's obviously lots of different new techniques that come and go, and some stay pat over the years. And for me, because of my experience of mostly just being involved in hockey injuries and hockey related injuries, I don't really have the experience in other sports to kind of to go into those areas. But as far as hockey goes, yeah, the trends change and there's some different things. But the biggest thing probably is like the health and the wellness and the conditioning of the player has evolved so quickly over the last 10, 20 years now that, you used to be able to get a player that would come to training camp to get into shape. Now it's like a 12-month-a-year business. Mm-hmm. People are staying in shape all the time. Time is money. You don't want to miss much time. Players don't want to be on the shelf too long. Risk of losing your job or an opportunity with a contract down the road. So you're always kind of evolving and doing the best you can to get players back with different techniques. There's so many different ones out there. And like you say, some you stick with, other ones you test out. And if they don't work, then you move on to the next thing.
Right. Yeah. There's been a lot of change recently, even in concussion management, hasn't there? Especially
absolutely.
That.
Yeah.
Right? That has been a big one.
Which has been really good for us as far as athletic trainers go, because, there wasn't really that safety net back in the day. It was really just a quick assessment on the bench. The trainer would obviously do that and make the call at the time. And, as time's gone on, we have all these other safety nets involved as far as removing a player from the play, educating the players on coaches and everybody else involved in the game is what signs and symptoms to look for. The time off, like the return to play protocol is how you're getting a player back. So all that stigma before of, you just, you had your bell rung, get back out there. It's taken a lot of time, but now it's in a good place in the game. We're still learning, but we have a lot more assessment tools at our hands now, a lot more computer softwares and programs that can help us assess the players and do some monitoring with them. And we've removed that stigma of taking a player away from the play where it was just like, maybe you got a little bit of a headache, you should be able to fight through it. And those days are gone now for the right way. And it protects everybody else involved to do the right thing for the player.
That's good to hear. And on the flip side of that, especially now that we're with the Giants and you maybe got some younger guys that, are coming up and and they're just scratching and clawing to be part of the Western Hockey League. Have you caught on to any, sort of myths that they've latched onto as a young 13, 14-year-old, 15-year-old trying to make their way, that they've got into your care and you're all of a sudden like, listen, dude, like that's not going to work at the next level? Is there any kind of pieces there that you've noticed over the last number of years with the Giants?
Yeah, I think you put your for me, like that's part of, how I treat and look after the players here now. They're obviously at a younger group between 16 and 20. And for me, being an older figure that's been around a little bit, I can provide that kind of information to help them out on and off the ice with different things. And so I take a little bit of pride in that at this level now, at this stage of my career, to be able to do that for these young guys. And whether that's just regular day in the life stuff or it's just like common sense things. And sometimes everybody's at different growth stages here at this level and maturity stages. And so you do your best to kind of to flex along and help everybody along the way.
Yeah, that's great. We got a segment of our show we call the Guide and Provide section, where we ask our guests to just kind of help unpack some advice for young players, for parents that, have kids that are at that elite level, and then also for young coaches. What are some things that you would say, from your career that you would say to a young player coming in right now with the Giants? What is a couple pieces of advice that you would be passing along?
Well, I think obviously like the biggest thing, and it shouldn't take this lightly, is just enjoy the game. Like it's these young fellas come from different programs, obviously all around the country in North America and some European players. And so there's different experiences for everybody. Some of these guys are still in school. Other ones are at the later stages of their junior career, maybe thinking of moving on to the professional ranks or the CIS level. And so everybody's a little bit different, but I think if you enjoy the game, enjoy this time of your life where it's still a game, it's competitive, and there's certainly lots on the line for these guys. But I think enjoying it and kind of delving into the different experiences, enjoying your teammates and everything else that goes along with it is probably the biggest thing, I think.
Yeah, that's great. Actually talked to my players about that before our big game yesterday. In my pregame talk, it just said, a lot of pressure. We got to win tonight's game, of course, but let's just be thankful we get the opportunity to play the game and really enjoy ourselves out here tonight, right? So,
I think any of us that are involved in the business, you have that appreciation as you go on, and this sort of, you do it for a living, whether you're a player, coach, director, trainer, equipment manager, PR person, media person. There's all those different aspects in an organization that make a good organization or a team. And it's not a regular job, and it's not for everybody, but it's certainly one of those careers that if it's for you, you can certainly enjoy it and go along with the highs of the winnings and the lows of the losings. And that's just the way the game is.
For sure.
Yeah.
What about parents that are out there kind of, it's Boxing Day, as we've mentioned, World Junior Games about to take place. Everyone's sitting there watching the game. Parents are sitting there dreaming of little Billy being the next, in 5 years, he's going to be playing for Team Canada and repping the jersey. What is some advice that you'd pass on to parents that are sort of right in the middle of the wheelhouse of their child's career right now?
Well, again, I think it's taken a little bit of a step back sometimes and just enjoying where the player's at. I mean, everybody wants to be at that highest level or in the top 1%. And sometimes that's just not going to be the reality or practical for everybody. And so I think just, going along, doing the right things, saying the right things, enjoying the journey as it goes along. And sometimes things will just work out for themselves.
Yeah. And over the years, you've had some brilliant coaching staffs that you've been able to work with, whether it's with the Team Canada programs or with the Canucks and even now with the Giants. Some young coaches that are out there, they're just they're cutting their teeth at an academy level or in a minor hockey program, and they're looking at maybe I want to make a career of this. What's some advice that you've seen passed on to you that you might want to pass on to these young coaches? Well,
coaching obviously is a really passionate position, and you really have to want to put the time into to the study of the game, understanding the athlete, and a lot of times that just takes time and experience, and to be able to do that. I certainly don't think that there's one recipe for everybody that works. Like, I've had a bunch of different coaches at different levels with different philosophies on how they go about managing their benches or managing their teams, and it's certainly not one recipe that fits everybody. So I think the biggest thing from as a trainer, you're recognizing the coaches, recognizing who you have in front of you, recognizing the staff you have around you, and recognizing the personnel that you have in front of you. And they're not all going to be the same. Today's kids got a different personality than they used to 5-10 years ago. And so it's adapting to those sort of changes and the personnel, and recognizing the personalities that you got in your group, and certainly trying to get buy-in and getting everybody on the same page is always the biggest challenge for a coach oftentimes, because that can fluctuate from week to week or month to month in a season. Mm-hmm. But the moment you get everybody believing and getting everybody on the same page, can pay off big dividends.
Yeah, that's great. And the next segment of our show, we call it the Grandpa B Story Time. Last time that I was out there with you guys in Vancouver, I wasn't a grandpa, but now I am. And my granddaughter is 1 year old now. And so instead of me just sitting around telling stories as a dad, now I get to sit around and tell grandpa stories. So
that's great.
Lots of stories we've shared over the last 20 plus podcasts here. But you've got I think you're going to have some real entertaining stories for us today in terms of your experiences. Maybe give us a couple highlights from your time with the Canucks, and then we'll work into some great times that you've had at World Juniors and Olympics.
Yeah, I mean, I was so fortunate to have my time that I did with the Canucks organization, and my time in the NHL, and met a lot of really neat people along the way, players and trainers and coaches and all the staff that's involved in the game, and all the different cities and the different organizations. You really build up a pretty good bond within your fraternity of trainers and coaches and players and stuff. So really, really fortunate to have, lifelong friends and relationships in the game. And, you just, oftentimes you think back, you might see a certain highlight on the TV of a player from 10, 15 years ago scoring a big goal, and brings back memories of being in the dressing room with those guys, or traveling on the plane and having different stories and your upbringing. Like for me, I was, obviously younger at the time, and newly married and raising a couple children and our son and a daughter during that time. And so it's a different stage of your life, and yet there's a lot of balls in the air and a lot of pressure and a lot of travel and a lot of time away from home, but so many great experiences and lifelong stories that, you always share. I share with people as things go along in daily life, or when you're working here in the dressing room with the players, and they like hearing some of the stories of the Pavel Burys and the Alex McGillneys and the Mark Messiers and the Sedin brothers. And so we always, some stories will pop up here and there, and, you end up with a group of 10 guys standing around you listening for the story. So that's always pretty neat. So not quite a grandpa story yet, but player stories that are still pretty good.
Yeah, for sure. You alluded to, the photo over your left shoulder on the screen there. It's a great sort of genesis piece. And when the Giants players walk into your office and they see that, and you can gather some really good conversation around that. What was it like to be part of that moment? And really, it's a tell.
For those of us that are just listening and can't see, what moment is it?
Yeah, sorry.
Because not everyone will watch the video of this. There'll be a podcast in the car,
but it's a picture, of the 2010 Olympics, right? And everyone hopefully listening, at least the parents would have that aha moment of everyone knows where they were when Sid walked out of the corner and threw it in the net to win for Canada to win that Olympic gold. But where were you at the time, Mike, in terms of that moment and that experience?
Well, I was right on the bench there in the moment of the goal there, and just the excitement, obviously being part of the staff of the 2010 Olympic team was, career highlight. We had some good years in and around that time with the Canucks. So there was, going to the Stanley Cup final in 2011. So I had pretty good run there for 2-3 years where, there was a possibility of getting the gold medal and then one game away from winning the Stanley Cup. So it was a pretty good run. But back to your question about, it was a career highlight. We had a staff put together at a World Championships in 2005. And so that was our group that we worked together at a World Championship together. And we clicked. They were veteran trainers around the NHL. Our equipment manager was from Vancouver Canucks. They had equipment manager Pierre Gervais from the Montreal Canadiens. And my counterpart, Jim Ramsey from the New York Rangers, who's a Canadian from Winnipeg, was part of the staff there. And so we just really clicked. They were veteran staff at the time. And we just, we had the experience to kind of go through that Olympic journey together. And boy, was it special just to be here in Canada, in Vancouver, and just the way the games went off and the way we won it in the end. It's a lifetime of memories and something I'm extremely proud of to be part of. And you go different places, or you go to different family events or different functions, and people would like to hear the stories of that experience. So it's something that you'll hold proud to, and go on to hold on for the rest of my life, that experience.
Yeah, and you're sitting on the bench, and it might be the most decorated team ever assembled in terms of Hall of Fame and just amazing careers of the players that were assembled, and like you said, the staff that was assembled. When the game was on the line there in the gold medal game, and you're on the bench, what describe for us the I don't know, the electricity that was just on that bench, the energy of, like, did you have a feeling that you were going to win, and then did you even have some of that gut feeling of like, oh yeah, maybe like Sid's going to get it done, or was it someone else that you just in your mind you were like, this is a great moment that you wanted to be part of?
Yeah, boy, it's really hard to pack it all together when you're in that moment on the bench. But when you think back, it was the whole country was on our shoulders for this, and in fact, the entire world was watching, and
Right.
you felt that as far as everybody involved. I think as a fan or people watching it too felt the pressure of what was on the line for this game. Us versus them. The biggest stage in the world for hockey. And so you really did feel the whole country there in support, and you knew the whole world was watching. And so the moment being there on the bench, to answer your question, I don't know if it was more just don't lose it. I think anybody was just thinking, just take it. As it turned out, the golden goal with Sid scoring, you couldn't script it up any better, and which was great for our game and for the history of the game to have all that happen. But I think they would have been happy if it bounced off somebody's head and went in at that point. I don't think it really mattered.
Yeah, I just couldn't imagine, like, just the electricity, even, like, waking up, it's your hometown, right? You're in Vancouver, getting up, going to the rink, starting that day probably pretty early, and just the anticipation of when's puck drop going to happen. And maybe it flew by for you, but I think as a fan, you kind of waited all day, right, for that, for that event.
Yeah.
And,
We stayed at the Olympic Village across the street in False Creek, and then the trainers, we would walk over obviously earlier in the day, and when you'd walk around False Creek to get to GM Place there at the time, there would be thousands and thousands of people just enjoying the Olympics from all over the world, wearing Team Canada jerseys. And we would walk through these crowds, and people would be high-fiving us and tapping us on the back, and we're the trainers. So you can imagine what it was like for the players and everybody else involved, on the magnitude, on how big it was. It was something really special, and very similar to that of going to the Stanley Cup final, but different in other ways too, just as far as more international, representing your country.
Yeah.
So it does have a little bit of a different feeling, and there is something obviously special about being part of the Olympics. Everybody brings that up. It's obviously, you're so proud of being part of your country and representing your country, but being part of the Olympics is something that's for anybody at any level, whether you're a player, coach, or support staff. It's a really, really honorable thing to be part of.
Yeah, that's pretty neat, and pretty obviously an amazing high. And then, as you mentioned, the following year, right? You're with the Vancouver Canucks organization. You're a game away from winning the Stanley Cup. so now you're on the bench in the loss of that Stanley Cup final, and of course, the rest of that is history. And downtown Vancouver wasn't exactly the friendly place of high fives and everything. Immediately following that, and for somebody that was right in that and living in that, did you ever feel at risk, even yourself, having to leave the arena or get home that evening, in the event of that Stanley Cup loss there?
No, not really. I think like there was obviously the huge letdown of losing, and you're kind of almost dealing with the emotions of that.
Yeah.
By the time we had all left, it was a little bit away from directly where we were, and I think everybody was getting out of the rink at the time. But obviously disappointing to have it go that way, losing, but then also to what happened in our city here during that time. So
Yeah.
we had a pretty good run in those years as far as an organization goes. We had, back-to-back President's Trophy winning teams here in Vancouver with a bunch of fabulous players, and it was really special. And I remember being on the bench in the 2010 Olympic, the gold medal game, when you asked that earlier, and I do have that distinct memory. And I had never really won anything big at that point in my career as far as that level goes. And I remember closing my eyes thinking, if I can just win one thing, let it be this.
Right. Yeah.
So, of course, we win, you win it and you're thinking, geez, okay, if this is how your career ends and you don't win anything else, then this is a pretty good thing to have won. And then the following year, when we're in Game 7, I closed my eyes and said the same thing. Okay, I take that back. If I can win one more other thing, let it be this. And so it would have been a pretty good package to have back-to-back, a Stanley Cup and an Olympic gold. And it just unfortunately didn't turn out that way. And sometimes the game goes that way. But it was still, quite the experience for, our team and the organization and the city and the province. It was such a magical time. And I think if everybody had their, if you can go back for that one game, there has to be a winner, has to be a loser. And when you're on the other end, it's certainly a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah. And Mike, I've had the opportunity to watch you at work, and see the relationships that you built and the trust that you have. And I know that you've got a servant heart, and it's probably fair to describe, like other people in your position have that same mindset. Otherwise you're not getting up at the rink at 6:30 in the morning and staying there till the wee hours of the evening. Those are incredible levels of sacrifice that you're putting in, and having that servant-hearted mindset to serve the players and the rest of the staff. But at the same time, then, when you have those special moments like in 2010, and there's families that then get to come on the ice and celebrate with you afterwards. Talk about what that meant for you to celebrate even with your family in those moments of great joy.
Yeah, I mean, it was absolutely phenomenal. I had my family in from Ontario. I'm from Hamilton originally, so I had my immediate family here, and my wife was here in Vancouver working for the Olympic Committee at the time, and so our children were quite young, and so we mostly reflect back now on pictures and those sort of moments. But it was such a whirlwind after you win, because in particular in Olympics, like a couple of the guys had left immediately after, Wayne Gretzky came in and spoke to the team. The Prime Minister came and spoke to the team. So you're in the dressing room and everybody's celebrating. And then, I think Chris Pronger and Scott Niedermayer left immediately right after to go to the closing ceremonies or across the street at BC Stadium to go. So, and then players are leaving that night or the next morning back to their NHL team. So it really happened quite quickly. I mean, we had a lot of good pictures, and even for us as trainers, we're busy packing up and getting the guys out of town. So a lot of good memories as far as photos and the game part was really special, but there wasn't a ton of time thereafter. We had a get together that summer where they presented, everybody got like a gold medal ring. So we had a summer party together where everybody reconnected, and that was a special time. We were able to bring our wives in and have a little bit of a ceremony and a get together. So it happens quick, but good memories.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And all-star cast, and we're seeing a lot of these, just even Patrice Bergeron and Jonathan Toews, right? Essentially retiring last year or announcing it this summer, and you're starting to see some of those guys. But what you mentioned it before we started the show, that it's probably, we'll look back at that roster. This might be the greatest Team Canada ever assembled.
Yeah, there's been so many good ones that might be the most special. Just the timing of it
Yeah.
being in Canada, in Vancouver, the players that we had on the team, the players that the other countries had on their teams, the best on best. I mean, the rosters across the board, how strong all the other countries were, it was just phenomenal in our game at the time. And so, yeah, I think it's certainly worth a debate. I think there'd be a lot of people that when you look at how many captains and Hall of Famers there are in that team and how many guys won Stanley Cups. It's just the trophies and everything along was just in the modern time of that part of the game. I think that was a real special time for that group.
Whose job was it when the puck went in the net? Whose job was it to secure that puck to make sure it got into the right hands?
Yeah, well, there was a lot of stuff happening thereafter because Sid had, the famous picture where he throws his gloves in the air. Well, one glove went over the glass actually, and so there was a bit of a recon where the local police and the RCMP got involved trying to track down for us to get this glove back because that stuff was going in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
So I don't know if it was the refs grabbed the puck and it was basically when we got in the room, I think Sid's one glove and we had to get the other one back there later. His mouth guard, helmet, stick, everything was commandeered and wrapped up and gone to the Hall of Fame right away. So I think the equipment managers, Patty O'Neill, he ended up getting that glove back somehow through somebody through the arena. It took like a week or two, but it ended up coming back.
Had to buy it off eBay or something.
I remember that story about the glove. Yeah. Funny.
With it being Christmas right now, Boxing Day, with the games going on, and your time with World Junior teams just even recently, man, there's got to be there's obviously heartbreak around like that. That day when the phone calls happen and they come out at 5 a.m, knock on your door, hey, you made the team or you didn't.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden to have like all the boys get together for maybe a little bit of a gift exchange on Boxing Day before the game. What's it like at the World Juniors? Because it's to me, it's a world championship, but it's really a Canadian legend event, right? It's a tradition
for us.
And so what's it like to be there on Boxing Day with these young guys that really, for them, the weight of the world's on their shoulders, even though they're 19-year-old guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal. It's the excitement of that is it's so great because majority of those players are obviously highly drafted or soon to be drafted. And so there's a lot of pressure on these young fellas, a lot of pressure on Hockey Canada and the organization. And there's a huge pride to be part of that program, especially at the World Junior level during Christmas time, because again, you do have that feeling that the whole country's watching. Everything shuts down. Seems like everybody, when we're off here at holiday time and Christmas time, everybody, it's a way of life, and when you're a part of it, it's certainly a great experience. A lot of pressure on these young fellas, and but really special because you have to really bond and come together as a team really quickly. And sometimes it works, other times it just doesn't, or puck bounced the wrong way and things just don't go your way. And so to win, I always say to people, like you always have a chance, but winning's hard and it never comes easy. And so when you do win, you can see the excitement and the pride of everybody being Canadian and the pressure that's involved and everybody involved is so massive. And so it really does become a special time. These guys are away from their families and they're young guys too. And it's just, I think it's just a real special thing to be part of for these guys.
Yeah. Well, I've really enjoyed some of these stories, Mike. It's been great to have you share those moments that you've been a part of. Again, just even talking about the people behind the scenes that really allow the game to take place. So many times we forget about it, that without you guys, the show can't go on. And so hopefully today we've given our listeners just a small little glimpse of behind the scenes into what your life looks like and other support staff that stand shoulder to shoulder with you as you continue to serve on the male and female side of the game at whether it's at junior levels or all the way up to the Olympics. You guys are really the unsung heroes, and more should be talked about and more stories should be written about you guys for all the work that you do. So I want to thank you for taking time out to be on the show today with us. But more importantly, I just want to thank you for doing what you do and for making sure that athletes are ready and can perform to the best of their abilities, because you were already dialed in beforehand to be able to make that happen for them.
Well, I appreciate it, Barrett. Thanks for the kind words. It was great being part of your and Justin's show here. And yeah, again, hopefully I provided some insight. And, if we got into stories, we could be here for a couple more hours. So I shed some light on it a little bit. But yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a real honor.
Yeah, and good luck to you with the Giants as well, right? Like you said, you got a young group there to work with, and with Manny and Adam to guide them, and even with management and all the guys that are out there pounding the pavement, and even coming. I always see Giants guys, scouts at our games, and looking for that next talent. Good luck to your whole group there. Pass on our hello to them, and best wishes for this holiday season and on to the remainder of your season.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Yeah, Merry Christmas to you guys, and thanks again for having me.
Great. To our listeners out there, you've been listening to the Win All Day Every Day podcast. My name is Barrett Kropp, and I'm joined here with my co-host, Justin Simpkins. We really do want to wish you guys all, it's a Merry Christmas and all the best in the new year. We hope that you have a chance to enjoy the hockey games today at the World Juniors, but even more important, that you get to spend some time with your family and enjoy the reason for the season. We're really thankful that you joined us today on the podcast in the midst of your holiday and all the turkey leftover hangovers that you might be having. But please give us, a like button, smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, make sure you're sharing this with your friends and family over the holidays, because we're really here just want to be able to continue to provide common sense, leadership information for those that are in the sport and outside the sport. And hopefully today you've heard some great words of wisdom from Bernie, and allow you to continue to grow as a listener, and hopefully your children, if they're in the sport world, can be able to garner some wisdom from today's show as well. So all the best, season greetings. Thank you for listening in today with our podcast.